She is a trauma therapist and an energy worker, originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and has now been in Tucson for 3 years. When she's not doing therapy, she enjoys spending time with her partner and cats, eating delicious meals, and being in nature. She has mastered the art of busyness and recently is trying to master the art of more being and less doing. Aren't we all? Please welcome to the stage for the first time, Kendall.
All right, good evening. As Mel said, my name is Kendall, Virgin Fister here. Before I get started, real quick, I know it's July 1st, but happy Pride, because Pride is every fucking day. Whew. All right, thank you for listening to my story. I came to know lessons about first response through a series of wildly synchronistic and strange events. First responders take a special type of person, someone who functions well in chaos, who knows how to deal with life and death scenarios, and some might say someone with a huge heart and just a touch of insanity. Welcome to my internal world and my collection of chaos. There are a few truths you should know about growing up in the Indiana and Kentucky area. Churches and liquor stores reign supreme. In fact, Indianapolis, Indiana has the most churches per capita in the United States. Even written into law back then was that you could not buy alcohol before noon on Sundays so that everyone could go to church and get their God before they got their booze. The second fact is that you will not find better fried chicken, and yes, I have been to Colonel Sanders' grave. The third, bourbon and water are like two sides of the same coin, readily accessible to quench your thirst. And the final harrowing truth is that this area, my home, was hit incredibly hard by the opioid epidemic. I was in high school in a small town in Indiana, and I really do mean small. We had one McDonald's, one Kroger, and infinite cornfields. If you've ever been to a barn party, there's a good chance that you have an idea of what growing up in this kind of country means. In the blink of an eye, we went from a normal farming town to people overdosing, dying, going to prison for drug-related charges, all within a couple of months. This reality really set in when a friend in school, Sierra Adams, for the first time tried heroin on her 18th birthday and overdosed and died that very same night. One day she was at the lunch table with us, and the next she was just gone. Our high school went from relatively chill to if you were not back from the bathroom in less than 5 minutes, school staff would come in because people were shooting up and overdosing in the bathrooms. My first response, overwhelm and disconnection. My first response was confusion. A lifelong lesson began to unfold. That change is the only truth. From there, things really took a dark turn. I watched my own brother, with a predisposition of being a complete shithead, prescribed Oxycontin for an injury in early high school. He completely spiraled from a superb athlete and intelligent kid and turned into a shell of a human. I started to find needles, plastic baggies, and the shadows of his dark presence creeping through our halls at night. Once, I watched him crush up and snort a Percocet on his dashboard before driving me in his Ford Ranger up to Indianapolis. He wrecked several cars, was arrested several times, and overdosed even more. My mom didn't know what to do, and my dad, nowhere to be found. My first response was to step up, to be a caretaker and the social worker of the family. And so that's what I did. I was the emotional support to my mom. I was mature for my age, which now we call developmental trauma. I became the person that my family called when they didn't know where to send my brother to treatment or just needed someone to talk to or to vent. I became the emotional backbone. the lesson I began to realize was that I must play a role in order to receive love. So from there, I did what any traumatized young person does. I didn't go to therapy or seek help. No. I said to myself, you know what? I need to work in the field of mental health. That will help me regain a sense of control in my life. And so that's what I did. I started out working in a youth residential foster care for kids whose behavior was so severe that they could not remain in the foster homes. Talk about an incredibly deep dive into the field. One night, Thanksgiving evening of 2017, I was working all alone. It was about 10 p.m. at night. And at night, you had to do something called rounds, where you would check on the kids every 15 minutes to make sure they were asleep and safe. So all the kids had been asleep for about an hour, and as I was doing my regular rounds, checking each of their rooms, I went to go open this one kid's door, and suddenly, out of nowhere, my heart began to race. I became terrified, and I had no idea why. I really had to talk myself down. Internally, I was like, okay, Kendall, this is fine. All the kids have been asleep for an hour. We're at work. We're chill. I finally opened this kid's door, and he was sitting straight up in bed. And mind you, he had been asleep and was now sitting up in bed, staring intently at the wall. So I'm at the door, and he's just looking like this. And I'm calling his name, and he's not responding, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So finally, he turns his head, his body stays straight, so it's like one of these, and he looks at me, and he says, I died. So I'm at the door, trying not to do what every white person does in a scary movie, and my first response was, yeah, not today, and I closed that door. Naturally, it was time to panic. I was freaking out, Googling demons, exorcisms, hauntings of traumatized children. And perfectly on cue, my friend and coworker Denise, a small Panamanian woman with a thick accent, walked in for third shift. I told her the whole story of what had happened, and her first response, yeah, there's some freaky energy in here. Now, notably, this home was also on an indigenous burial ground, was a prior TB hospital where everyone fucking died, and now was the home to these kids who had been deeply traumatized with incredibly erratic behavior. So I was like, yeah, there is some freaky energy here. And she's like, no, I know there's some freaky energy here. So naturally I said, what do you mean? She revealed to me at that moment that she was a psychic medium and asked me to put my hands out. Her first response, there is a girl with long dark hair who overdosed and died on her birthday, and she's here with you now, warning you of this dark spiritual energy. Mind you, this was over 10 years since the era had passed, and I hadn't talked or really thought about it in quite a long time, let alone been able to access this grief. Instantaneously, my mind was blown. My head began to spin with questions like, how the hell did she know that? If that's true, and she is this medium, then what does that mean about what is real? What is reality? Do my ancestors know how much weed I'm smoking? I spiraled into the beginning of my spiritual awakening. Over the next couple of years, Denise changed my life. She would come to me out of the blue and say things like, honey, you need to get rid of that man. Yes, I did. And told me how to spiritually cleanse myself of a toxic relationship with an ex. So ladies, let me know if you need a spiritual support to cut out these toxic exes, because do I have a ritual for you? She gave me a prayer book in May of 2018 and said, be careful, this one is strong. That night, I prayed this tedious prayer book before bed. I drifted into slumber and began to dream. I dreamt of an old Egyptian building with these beautiful timeless columns, accented with ornate gold high and low. There was a guide in my dream leading me down this grand staircase of white marble. I was led to these massive ornate doors and stood before them until I was summoned. The door opened. Inside, it was like a movie theater, yet there was only one seat, and I knew that seat was meant for me. As soon as I sat in the chair, the door closed behind me, and everything went pitch black. I was burst into a different reality, a spiritual snooze experience that I can only describe as what felt like an earthquake happening in my physical being. I began to hear and feel these intense frequencies that were an unearthly experience. I thought I would die there. I thought I might never wake up, but I did. So my first response was to call Denise that next morning and say, "What the fuck did you just give me?" She very casually said, "Oh yeah, that's just spirits communicating with you." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's just spirits communicating with me." Okay. She was and she still is my spiritual guide. She's taught me parts of her craft and rituals. She's called on me to help people pass over from life to death several times. I've performed an exorcism on a house with trapped spirits. She guided me to step into being a spiritual first responder of sorts, helping those stuck between realms to move through their ties of pain, keeping them stuck in this world and towards the ethereal light. In 2021, my great spiritual awakening happened. On February 27th, my 2-year-old cat, Noki, passed away from feline leukemia. On May 26th, my brother, Hunter Jordan, passed away from a fatal overdose. In June and December, 2 other acquaintances passed away from fatal overdoses. And on June 2nd, 2022, the following year, a year to date of the very same day that my brother's funeral was, one of my greatest friends and mentors, Amanda Foley-Byard, relapsed after 8 years of sobriety and overdosed and died. My first response, an inescapable shock and bitter grief that took me to many dark nights of the soul. I learned so many lessons that I did not choose to learn and yet realize in retrospect that I needed to learn. You cannot bypass grief no matter how hard you try. You cannot drink enough, smoke enough weed, vape enough. You cannot distract enough. I learned that to be with the deep hole in my heart is the best way to honor those who have passed on, the best way to express grief. I learned that in order to hold light in darkness, you must intimately know darkness. I learned the depth of pain. So as a trauma therapist now, I look back and I see the pattern. My first response was to attempt to save those around me because I could not save the people that I love the most. I chose jobs in a system of chaos because I intimately knew chaos. I chose to play the role of the social worker in my family because it gave me a role and a perceived sense of being loved. I learned that, in a way, we are all spiritual first responders. It is our most human experience to experience pain, suffering, grief, loss, and trauma. My greatest lesson and my invitation is to honor your first response to trauma and to pain, to see it, to really feel it, and to let it guide you to the depths of your soul that you've never known. Let it be your collection of chaos that allows you to meet yourself over and over again at every breakup, every death, every loss, and every change. Shout out to all the first responders in this world, my fellow collectors of chaos, teachers, nurses, protesters, therapists, EMTs, shout out my crew of librarians, and beyond. I'm calling on myself and our community to let our first response to what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in the United States, and what is happening across the world to be grief, rage, and the deepest level of compassion. Let it guide us to a proactive approach to community and show us the depths of the human soul that we have never known. Thank you.